Hello, my name is Beck and welcome to a spoiler-free and spoiler review of Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. This is her first book in the Farseer trilogy, and yes, I'm going to be talking about spoilers but not immediately. So when this video turns to red outlining me instead of green, which is what it's on right now, that means I'm going to switch to talking about spoilers, and I will be talking about the ending and everything and all my thoughts that are spoilery. So if you don't want to be spoiled for this book, I will give a clear warning for when I switch. So you don't need to worry, the first part will be spoiler-free. So let's now get into the plot of this book, or roughly the plot, my thoughts and feelings, as well as my rating. So, this book follows a young boy named Fitz. He starts out the book as a 6-year-old boy, but that might be off-putting to some people. I know it might have been off-putting to me if I hadn't had close friends and family recommend this to me at a very early age. So he does grow throughout this book, and you see him as a young teenager. So if the 6-year-old part is off-putting to you, he doesn't stay that way for very long, and it's a really interesting growing point to enter as somebody so young and experiencing this world for the first time, essentially, at Buckkeep Castle. So Fitz is a young boy. He's the bastard son of Prince Chivalry, and because he's a bastard son of the royal line, if he is let out of Buckkeep Castle and he goes away from the palace and the royal line, then he can potentially be used to blackmail, he can be used to ransom, and he also has a claim to the throne, so he's a potential risk to the royal blood as well. And because he is a risk, they don't want anything happening to him. They want control of and over him, and they want to essentially look over him and keep him under their wing so they can use him however they like. And so they keep him close for that reason. They train him a little bit for that reason, and so he doesn't really get to go anywhere significant, and he becomes very much a king's man. And I love the way that that played into his identity. So he, at the very start, is obviously very, very young, very impressionable, and he gets taken in by the stablemaster Burrich. Burrich used to be the right-hand man of Prince Chivalry, except Prince Chivalry, out of his shame, he doesn't come back to Buckkeep Castle. He kind of retires in Withywood, which is a estate away from the royal line. So Fitz is very much on his own. He doesn't have any family with him, and Burrich is this guy who was recently injured. He's quite rude and aggressive and just annoyed that he doesn't have any support, and so he has to look after this kid, and he doesn't really know this kid, doesn't really want this kid. So already we're on rocky ground at the beginning, and I love how there are so much depth to the characters already. There's so much emotion at the very beginning, and now I'm going to get into my thoughts about what I felt about the book. And while I love that there was so much emotion in here, I also found the beginning very slow in terms of the pace. So Robin Hobb, to me, her strengths are also her weaknesses, and while I could overlook some of those things, starting into a series again and wanting to immediately latch onto it and love it, I could do that with her characters, but her pace and her plot were a little bit too slow at the start for me. So I did only give it a 4 stars, even though this rejuvenated a lot of the love I had for rereading this book. So if you are a new reader, you will probably give it like a 3, a 3.5, maybe a 4, depending on what you read books for, because the beginning 2/3 are quite slow, but that doesn't mean they are bad either. They're very rich with characters, like I said. A lot at the beginning are characters that I didn't expect. So when I saw their names again, I got quite excited because you're introduced to a lot of characters at the start, but not in a bad way. Robin Hobb very much builds all of them individually, and so all of them felt very fleshed out. And I said in my reading wrap up for January that I felt like I could walk into Buckkeep Castle and I'd know my way around. I just want to go there and I want to sit in the kitchen and I want to eat some nice hot bread and cheese and butter. It felt so tactile to me, and that was because we saw it through Fitz's experience of it. And I also love the way that we get to see a little bit of the magic start to be established in this book as well, because there is a telepathic magic, or 2 streams of it rather, that are present in this book, and it gets into more detail of that later on as Fitz starts to explore it, and it is present at the very beginning, even though there's not very much understanding of it from Fitz's perspective. So you see little hints, and I really appreciate that, because it doesn't info dump on you as far as the world building, but it gradually feeds things to you with context so that Fitz can learn it as well, because the world very much comes further into clarity the more he gets to experience of it. And I really like that method of storytelling. It just felt slower because Fitz literally had to run into things in the plot in order for things to happen and be explained. So I think I felt connected to this story. I felt connected to all these characters. There were moments that I got really emotional. There was a moment that I cried. And so even though I got so emotional about it, the pace is just the thing that held me up, and I really wanted to give it a 5 stars, but unfortunately I could only give it 4. However, I remember adoring all of these characters. I remember loving this series so hard with all of my heart and soul, and so I really adored rereading this. You can see that there are tabs in here, so when I was reading it, I was flagging it because Robin Hobb does this thing where she is so detail oriented and she's very deliberate with whatever she's talking about. So a lot of the things have meaning the first time you read them, and then they've got a double meaning when you reread them, and that's what I was picking up. But for a first reader, you wouldn't pick up on that double meaning, but it would still mean something else to you when you read it the first time, if that makes sense. So I love this. I love the layers of meaning. I love the layers of characterization. She's so intentional and I love it. And she's got so much detail, but I just wish the plot was faster. The last 150 pages just grabbed me by the scruff of the neck and like dragged me through the story. It was so breakneck and I love that. She tends to have faster endings to her books and a very slow burn at the very beginning. I find that the first 2 books in her trilogies are usually a bit slower, and then the third one is a bit of a hard hitter. So she takes a while to build up. She takes her time. She just takes you by the hand and brings you through her stories. So she doesn't want to rush, and I love all of that build up, but I also wanted it to be a little bit faster. So because I wasn't quite satisfied with the pace, it wasn't something that destroyed my reading experience. It didn't destroy my enjoyment. I still read this quite quickly. It's quite a short book for an adult fantasy, so it is worthwhile picking up. I did give it 4 stars and I really, really loved it, and I can't wait to continue. So now I want to go and start talking about spoilers, but if you like this spoiler-free review, come and chat to me in the comments. But now we're going to talk about spoilers. So there are a couple of moments that just screamed of foreshadowing to me. Like I said earlier, Hobb is very intentional with her writing style, and so when she wrote certain moments like Fitz mentioning being a catalyst, when she talked about Burrich and his values about family, and just a few other things in terms of the magic that she's slowly starting to set up in this book. I can't go into specifics because it's not revealed in this book, so I don't want to spoil anything for the future. This is only spoilers for this book, but the way that she set things up were absolutely incredible, and a few times they really rocked me emotionally because I understood their echo and their impact across the rest of the series. And I also did cry at a couple of points as well, or I welled up with tears. So the first time that I cried was actually when Fitz was in the castle and he was talking to Prince Verity, and Verity is his uncle. And so when he was talking to Verity, Fitz has very much taken on the identity that everybody has pushed onto him, rather than taking his own space and carving that out for himself. He's taking on the expectations of the royal line, of being a bastard son, of everybody's outward judgment of him. And for the first time, Verity actually stops, sits back and looks at Fitz and gives him a name, names him Fitz Chivalry. And that was a moment that just really rocked me to my core. I don't know why, but I think it was to do with the way that Hobb builds up her characters, because they have so much depth and meaning to me and they all feel very multifaceted. So when that moment happened, it just felt like that deep resonant feeling of this is very significant. This is a turning point in Fitz's life. So I felt like that was very much a bond, starting with Verity and Fitz. I loved it so much, and it just made me so emotional seeing my little baby Fitz get named for the first time. It had so much emotional significance to me. Another moment that had so much emotional significance to me were the animals. So I am a sucker for animals in books, and when Fitz and Nosy formed their bond at the beginning, I knew that something was going to happen because I remembered it, and then sure enough, Burrich took Nosy away. And for the entire book, I'd forgotten. I thought that Burrich had actually killed Nosy because of the severing of that bond, but then Nosy came back in at the end and I was like, oh no, because I remember how much that broke my heart, especially at the very end when Nosy had his final saving of Fitz with biting his hand to pull him out of that hot spring and save his life. That part, that was the last line of this book, and it was so hard hitting and emotional. Again, it just really struck me. And then that moment as well with Smithy too. I forgot about Smithy in this entire book. I forgot about his presence, but Fitz connecting to these animals really had such significance because I just forgot how lonely he was as a kid. I forgot that he was so much on his own. He had to take on all of these pieces of identity and kind of cobble them together and be what everyone else wanted him to be. But then when it came to emotional support, nobody was there for him. So of course he was going to build these bonds with these animals as a compensating force. And so when Galen attacked Fitz mentally, Smithy was the one who was there to save him. And that was just so heartbreaking to me. And again, it felt so realistic of Hobbs' characters. It was just so realistic and so... I don't even have words for how much it impacted me. It had such emotional value and it was just incredible. And I can't believe I'd forgotten moments like that, but Hobb, I know, has moments of loneliness and identity and heartbreak scattered all throughout her books through all different characters, and so these were only a handful of moments that really struck me, and I'd forgotten how much I loved this book. I truly had forgotten. And I also mentioned this earlier on, but I said that characters in here appeared at the very, very beginning, and most of them were introduced quite early, within the first 20 to 50 pages, which is quite early in a book of this length. So I'm quite surprised that we already heard from Burrich, Fitz, Verity, Regal, Molly, Chade, and the King even. There were so many characters that were side characters that already felt built up to me, that already had significance. There were also places at Buckkeep Castle that again felt very real to me. And I love that Fitz just kind of lives in the back end of the castle and in the kitchens himself. He doesn't really have a presence at court, and it just sets everything up politically so that I understand everything. And I also loved Kettricken. I'd forgotten that she was so young at the very end of the book. I'd forgotten how she was introduced. I'd forgotten the whole political aspect of Regal and the poisoning at the very end. I loved that political significance. Normally, I'm not somebody who loves politics in a book, but when they're so tied into manipulation and character that way, and the way that Hobb executed all of this in such a bang, 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 fast-paced but meaningful way, it just really had me at the very end. And I love that there was a build up to that point. I wish the pace was a little bit faster at the beginning, but I was still interested, I was still connected, but I wasn't invested until the last third. So overall, I would give this a 4 stars. I can't wait to read the rest of the books in this series. Obviously, there will be reviews for everything that I read in this Elderlings Chronicle when I get to them all. But I gave this 4 stars, like I said. Let me know if you've read Robin Hobb or if you're thinking about it, because she is one of my favourite authors and I have just rediscovered why, and I can't wait to continue, obviously. My favourite character comes in the second book and I can't wait to see him again because I'm going to be even more emotional than I was in this book. But thank you so much for watching this video. I will chat down in the comments to you and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.